Hello knitters, Barbara Benson here. I'm an independent knitwear designer who also likes to make videos here on my YouTube channel, Watch Barbara Knit. Make sure to check in the description below where you will find links to where you can get my patterns and all of the different social media places where we can contact, including Facebook and Patreon. Today, I want to discuss something with you that I've been wrestling with because it's kind of challenging. It's a difficult thing, and what it is that we've discussed how to substitute yarns in patterns before. I'll put a link to that video in the description below when you're substituting like for like. But sometimes knitters want to try to knit a pattern with a yarn weight different than what the pattern actually calls for. And in certain patterns, this is possible. I'm not saying all patterns it's possible, and I'm not saying that what I'm going to talk about is going to work for absolutely everything, but there are ways to swap out yarn weights. And by yarn weight, what I mean is the thickness of the yarn. Your typical yarn weights, and again I have a video on discussing yarn weights, I'll link in the descriptions. The description's helpful. Is fingering. Your standard ones are fingering, sport, DK, worsted, Aran. It has to do with the thickness of the yarn, how heavy that yarn is a lot of the terminology that people use. And say you have a pattern that's designed to use one weight yarn like worsted, and you really want to use a fingering weight yarn for it, or something that's designed for DK and you want to use worsted. How do you finagle that? And it is possible. It involves a lot of math on your part. So I want to go over that kind of substitution real quick. Well, not real quick. I'm going to try to go over a basic approach to it. And I've even made one little visual aid to help y'all. But what it comes down to is the first thing you have to do is you have to do a gauge swatch. And this is actually most of the time the first step in designing something from scratch, because in a way you're kind of doing that. So what you have to do is take whatever yarn that you're wanting to substitute into your pattern and cast on, enough stitches that you can get a nice big swatch. If the pattern's going to be knit in the round, you need to swatch in the round. If the pattern is being knit flat, you need to knit the swatch flat. And you need to cast on, you need something bigger than 4 inches. So you need to cast on enough stitches that it's going to be wider 4 inches. And then you need to knit it for enough rows or rounds that it's bigger than 4 inches. Once you've knit that swatch, you need to block that swatch. Okay, so already I'm getting into territory that a lot of y'all are going to be like, this is too much effort. But this is for those y'all who want to try to do something like this. So once you have your swatch knit and blocked, completely dry, then you need to measure it. And you need to figure out how many stitches and how many rows or rounds you are getting in your 4-inch measurement. It's best to measure over a larger distance because that gives you a more accurate representation, because sometimes you're looking at half stitches. But once you figure out how many stitches you have in 4 inches and how many rows you have in 4 inches, then you take that, or 10 centimeters. I apologize for not saying 4 inches, 10 centimeters the whole time. If you're working in metric, it's 10 centimeters or 4 inches. It's about the same. And then you need to divide it and figure out how many stitches per inch you're getting. I've never done the math in centimeters, so I guess maybe you're trying to figure out how many stitches per centimeter you're getting, but you need that unit. You need to know how many stitches per inch or centimeter you have and how many rows or rounds. You need that unit to do your future math. Now, once we have that gauge, You know what your gauge is. And what we're going to work with in the example, just to make it a little bit easier. So let's say you have a worsted weight piece, and my drawing is of a scarf, that calls that the worsted gauge that the pattern calls for is 20 stitches by 26 rows or rounds in 4 inches, 10 centimeters. Okay. So I have a cheat sheet. So if you divide that by 4, that's your inches, you're going to get 5 stitches per inch and 6.5 rows per inch. And again, the centimeters, it works the same way. Then let's just say you did your gauge swatch for your fingering weight, and where your fingering weight, which is a typical one, you're getting 26 stitches in 4 inches and 34 rows in 4 inches. Then you have to divide that by 4. So for fingering weight, you have 6.5 stitches per inch and 8.5 rows per inch. Now there's where you're going to see your difference. Where worsted had 5 stitches per inch, fingering has 6.5 stitches per inch. So you have more stitches per inch. So here's my little drawing I have for you. We're just doing a plain old scarf. Okay? This is just a rectangle so that you can get the idea. So let's say our scarf is 7 inches wide, 17 3/4 centimeters, and 84 inches or 213 centimeters long. Okay, that's what we have. So the original pattern, which is worked in worsted weight, your cast on would be 35 stitches, because 5 stitches per inch times 7 gives you 35 stitches. To get that same 7-inch width, you're going to have to cast on 45.5 stitches because of our math. 7 times 6.5. Now you notice you cannot cast on a half stitch. So this is where it becomes a little imprecise. You're going to have to decide if you want to go with 45 or 46. It's just a half stitch. It's a scarf. Not going to break the bank. So there you're seeing that you're going to have to change your cast on. So you're going to have to cast on more stitches. Then if we're going for this full 84, it's 8 feet. It's a big long scarf. If you're going for that full length in worsted, you would have to work 546 rows. It's a scarf. It's a lot of rows. And that is the 84 inches times 6.5 rows per inch. For fingering weight, you're going to have to do 714 rows to get that same length. And that is multiplying the 84 inches times 8.5 stitches per inch. I know, it's a whole lot of numbers. It makes your brain hurt. I hope my little illustration is helping a little bit. What it comes down to is if you want to substitute a yarn weight, you have to find your gauge and then refigure all the numbers in your pattern based on your gauge. So if you're doing a garment and you're looking at the schematic, you figure out what size you're doing and you look at every single measurement. You're going to have a bust measurement. You're going to have a cast on. You're going to have distances from like your armpit down. You're going to have a neckline. So you're going to have to adjust for that. So if your pattern, like if it's a sweater and it's got shaping, you're going to have to adjust based on your new row gauge, because if it says decrease X number of stitches every inch, well, in the worsted, 1 inch is going to be around 6 rows, and in the fingering, 1 inch is going to be around 8 rows. So you're going to have more rows in between your decreases. But at the same time, if it's saying, decrease X number of stitches around, you're going to have to figure out how many inches they're decreasing. Okay? So this is, as I said, it gets complicated. So, and we're just going to with easy numbers. So let's say they're decreasing 10 stitches per round. In the worsted weight, since we know it's 5 stitches per inch, if they're decreasing 10 stitches, that means they're decreasing 2 inches per round. So you're going to have to go backwards with your math. You know you need to decrease 2 inches. So with the fingering, that's going to be, you're going to need to decrease instead of, you're going to have to decrease 6.5 times 2. So 13 stitches around. See, so as I said, it gets complicated and there's lots of math involved. But that's like the basic idea behind it. Now, the reason why I said this isn't necessarily going to work for all of your patterns, because if you get into a pattern that has, let's say, cables in it, a lot of times the cables are placed in very specific ways. And if it's a 2/2 cable, a 2/2 cable in worsted is going to be a certain width. And if you're going down to fingering weight, that 2/2 cable is going to be skinnier. So then you're going to have to figure out, if I'm increasing the number of stitches, how many more cables am I going to have to do? How am I going to distribute this? And it just, you're redesigning the pattern, and it might be a little challenging. The colorwork yokes that are so popular right now, it's not going to be the same size, and it's not going to work the same. So again, it's really challenging. But just for a simple pattern, like I said, a scarf, something that is like just an all over texture pattern, or in stockinette or garter, those kind of things you can adjust in this way. If you really want to knit, say, a DK weight sweater in fingering weight yarn and it has something elaborate, your better choice is going to be by holding the yarn double. If you like, I have this fingering weight yarn and I want to do this, if you hold 2 strands of fingering weight at the same time, you get DK, double knitting. So fingering weight can also be called knitting weight. DK means double knitting weight. So it's the knitting weight, fingering weight, doubled. Keep in mind, though, if you're making that substitution, if it calls for 800 yards of DK, you're going to need 1,600 yards of the fingering because you're holding it double. And so, like, if you double sport, you get worsted. If you double fingering, you get DK. And if you double DK, it bumps you up into like the land of Aaron weight. And if you double worsted, you're getting up into bulky weight. So you can, and in theory, if 2 strands of fingering means DK, then 4 strands of fingering would get you Aaron weight. But that's a whole lot of strands to be going on, and it's going to change the structure and the visual texture of your work. But it is viable, and sometimes preferable to doing a whole bunch of math, which is what this video was supposed to be about. Because I've had people ask how you can substitute like a fingering for a worsted, or to change that weight. And it is, the steps are, you have to use your yarn with the needles you're going to work in the method of either round or flat. You have to knit a gauge swatch and get an accurate gauge. Figure out your stitches per inch or centimeter and your stitches per rows, and do all of this math. It's going to take paper and you're going to have to write stuff down. It is doable, but it's complicated. So this probably isn't the most exciting or fun video that you've watched of mine, but hopefully it has been informative and maybe answered your question as to whether you want to try to do this and how you might approach it. If you like this video, please give it the thumbs up, click that like button, and if you would like to be notified whenever I upload a new video, please subscribe to my channel and select notifications. Thank you so much.